Hi, my name is Ray Konopka, and in this session we're going to talk about effectively using list controls in our mobile applications. Before we get started to the technical details, I do want to provide a little bit of context and illustrate how important list controls are to our mobile applications. And then we'll take a look at the various capabilities of the different types of list controls that are present inside of the FMX framework. And then once we have that, then we're going to dig right into a whole lot of code. Specifically, we'll be focusing a little bit on TListBox, but most of our time is going to be spent on TListView. And if you did see my session on this in previous conferences, I actually have a brand new example that illustrates a more interactive list view with some of the new capabilities that's present. So it should be a really cool session, have lots of code, and so let's get through the slides really quick. So first off, list controls play an important role in our mobile apps. We use them all over the place. They're a natural mechanism for user interaction for users, especially with the touch interfaces, being able to scroll them very easily. We don't have to worry about constraining the size, which works very well when we have many different form factors. But we'll use them in contacts and in playlists for your appointments, bookmarks, you name it. Even if you think of a photo album, is really just a specialized list. Happens to be more of like a grid where you have horizontal and vertical cells, but it's still just a way to manage multiple items that all are the same type. Scores, messages, you name it. Even the Messages app on your iPhone and your Android devices, the balloons that go back and forth to show the text conversations, that is just a specialized list where each item based on the source is displayed a little bit differently, what side of the field it's on and so forth. So let's dig into some of the capabilities that we need to have, that we expect when we're talking about a mobile list. For example, you have to have the text, that's a given, but it's very common to also have some detailed text associated with that. Now where that text may be varies, depends on the control. It might be underneath the main text item, it may be centered into the center of the display, aligned to the right, kind of doesn't really matter. Another common functional point for all of our list controls is the ability to group items together. This makes it easier for the user to locate items within a longer list that's grouped together. Think of this as contacts grouped by first initial of the last name. It's a way to quickly locate large number of items. Also corresponding to this are headers and footers that you would want to have included into the list information. Being able to display an image is a critical piece. Think of the album covers for each song or album that you want to display in your list. Those are important to have. Accessory indicators are the things that tell us that there's more information available or there's more activities to do. It's what we use to select items if we're going to multi-select items in a list on our mobile devices and do something with that. These are all the accessories will indicate that to the user. Searching is built in to the controls that the FireMonkey framework provides, and it's great that they do because this allows us to automatically, with changing a property value, introduce searching capabilities into our lists. Works out great. Embedding other controls. This is actually something we'll illustrate in the first example that talks about how we use a list box with a lot of extra flexibility, and being able to embed other controls into each item gives us a lot of flexibility for creating some very creative UIs. So the first thing that you'll run into when you're dealing with a new mobile application in the FireMonkey framework is you have two choices between your classes. You have the TListBox, which was there since the beginning of FMX. You also have the TListView. And they both serve similar purposes. However, as they've both been enhanced over time, there's two clear purposes where you will use one or the other. TListBox is extremely flexible. It is highly style driven. It's pretty much viable for short lists. If you have longer lists, you're probably not going to want to use a TListBox because there's some scrolling penalty that you get. It's the downside of having all this extra flexibility of having each item be styled independently of the other ones. However, if you do need to manage a list of things, a list of settings is a classic example, or something that's not going to be that long, but you do want to provide a very rich interface, the TListBox is a very good example of that. The alternative control is the TListView, and this was added more recently, and it's designed to be very high performant with larger lists of items. So whether they're independently sourced or they're data bound, but they're much longer in nature, there's a lot less of the flexibility in the original sense. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't do a lot of the mobile or the list functional items that we mentioned in the previous slide. We can. It's just that it's been designed in a way to make that much more efficient. And now, what I've liked to do is the list view is very powerful. It does do the job very nicely. It's much faster when you have a lot of items, but there's some extra things that we really would like to be able to do. Not go to the craziness of a TListBox and style each item, but it would be nice to have some more interactions and not just rely on the canned accessories that are there. And that's what I'll be showing in the last example today, is how we can really extend the TListView above and beyond what it currently supports. So, digging in a little bit deeper to the list box, you can have different types of items. There's a header item, a footer, and normal, so you can create them as needed and build up a list that you need. There's also a header bar, which is like a toolbar, but it goes above the list. Below that would be a search box if you choose to enable that. There is a style lookup property for each item, so when you actually have to create the item, and then of course you can set up a style lookup for each one, which would then control all the different pieces of that item. There's also grouping kind and whether or not we show checkboxes. Pretty standard stuff. The TListView don't confuse it with the TListView as the Windows Common Control that's from the VCL side. The TListView is more in tune with the TListBox from the FMX side, but it's really designed to be more efficient. With that said, I like to consider the items as more like collection items. So if you've ever worked with collections, it's a way to have a list of things that are all the same type. Now you can have some variances because each type item can have properties associated with it, but that's really what we have. Now, in order to control the display of these items in a list view, we have two main properties that we're going to look at. One is item appearance and item appearance objects. And together, these give us a lot of flexibility for determining or controlling what do each item look like when they get displayed inside the list. Now, what I should point out is that this is for all of the items in the list. We're really talking about a homogeneous look and feel for each item in the list. If you need to have your items look differently, dramatically differently from one versus the other, not just state information, but have a different layout and things, then you're going to need to go with styled list box control. But for most uses, the list view will work very well. Likewise, we can have an item, rather than have different kinds of items that represent a header, footer, and the regular normal item, a single item can you change a flag, a property of that, to determine whether or not this item will be a header or a footer. Essentially, you change its capabilities rather than create a different item type altogether. You can also have search built in, so there's a search visible property, and then of course there's also the edit mode, which is kind of cool because that's built in so that we can have some management of our edit or our list just built into the component right off the bat. So it makes our lives much easier. So that is all the slides that I have. The rest of the session I really want to dig into some source code and take a look at what it is that these list controls can do. So here I'm in XE7 and I have our first sample project called the settings list box loaded, and it illustrates exactly that. It uses the TListBox to set up a couple different groups. Each item is individually accessible. So whenever you have a list box, you can go into the items editor and you can go ahead and add new items, and as we click on each of these we know, okay, that's a header item, and we can find that in the type that was created. So it's a list group box header. Likewise, we have regular items, and I don't believe I have a footer on each of these. What's nice is that how I pick it is based on what I drop down. So that'll allow me to control what I want to show up. Each of the different options, I can drop down other controls. I can associate images and things with a particular item. Now, one of the things that you can also do for each individual item is that there's some item data. So I can say whether there's an accessory or not. The more gives me the little triangle, the chevron, and then I can set up the detail being 3 lines. In this particular example, I actually have a tab control where there's 2 tab pages. One is the main, which has all these items. The second is when I click on preview lines, it takes me to a new page with another list on it, and I can see that either by clicking on this little dot here or changing the active page for the tab control as well. So here I'm setting the preview lines by using another list control, and for a mobile device this works really well. You might think, oh, I should just pop up a little combo or something. Depends on the list, because the pop-up's going to be very small with your real estate, so shifting into a new view makes a lot of sense, especially if this list is long. Allows them to scroll very easily. Another alternative is to use the picker on the various platforms, but again, sometimes that is only good for showing a couple items at a time, not scrolling through a very long list where you want more context about what you're looking for. Included, if this was really long, I could invoke the search to help me locate something. So let me go back to my my tab here, and I'll change the active back to there, and let's give this a run on the iOS simulator, which is what I currently have set as my target. So here's the application running, and as you can see, I can click and toggle each of the different items as necessary. I can go ahead and click on the preview lines and I get my new view coming in, and I can change that to be 2 lines, and it updates the display just as I would expect it to. So pretty nice and flexible managing a list of items, and if I change this to a different form factor, this will all work just fine, assuming I have my list occupying the client area of the control. So let's take a quick look at what the code behind doing the preview items looks like. All that we're doing is we're setting the appropriate accessory on the item preview lines. That's the items on the next screen, so that when I toggle into there, the appropriate item has the check associated with it. And so we initialize them all to be empty, and then we iterate through to find what it needs to be set to, and then which is down here, and then the next piece is to update the item data.detail with based on whether there's no preview lines, whether there's one or there's n number of lines to preview. The execute target is how we automatically change back to the previous view. So we're going to execute the tab action that I've created on it to do the navigation from one tab to the other. And that makes that work really well. Likewise, to get to the tab action 2, which is the preview tab, that's why I invoke that when we click on that item. And that's pretty much all there is to the list box. Very easy to use and effective for certain situations. Next up, I want to dig into the list view and see what capabilities it can give us. In the next example, we're going to use a TListView rather than TListBox to manage a list of items. And in addition to simply pre-populating them at design time that our first example did, we're going to dynamically load up the list and build it from a particular data source. So before we get started, I just want to give you a quick overview of the layout of this application. It's again 2 tabs. One, we're going to have a list of items, then we're going to go off to a detail view of that. As you can tell from the title, we're going to see the MLB standings after the regular season, all the various teams in Major League Baseball. We can click on one of them, drill in to get some details of the players on that team, and highlight some of the different pieces that are available. One of the things I mentioned early on was there are 2 main properties that determine how an item in this list, TListView, will appear, and they're the item appearance and item appearance objects. And if we expand this out a little bit, what we'll find is quite a few little pieces. One, we can determine whether or not what the footer appearance will look like. By default, it's list header. Same thing for a header appearance; they will look the same. The item appearance list, we want the regular items going to look as with the item detail on the right side. If we edit it, what that's going to look like, we're going to show the check mark when we put it into edit mode, and we can control the heights for the various things. The item appearance objects allow us to have more fine-grained control over the different types of objects or their different states. So for a regular item, we can expand this and we can customize the accessory, customize the detail, or even the text itself. And if we expand, say, the detail, this gives us a whole slew of different things that we can modify. And right now we're pretty much just using the defaults for these items. Same thing for the regular text. So if you want it to word wrap, you want it to be aligned to the beginning of the control versus the end, you can toggle each of these values. So before we go and run this, let's take a look at how we're going to load the player data. So in this particular application, I have a unit that we're going to bring in called the MLB team data. And that all this is doing is managing a team info, team roster. There's some dictionaries that we're populating just in code. So no database. It's really lightweight. It's just going to give us all the information we need. You could almost envision this coming from a web service call or some other external source of information. But not real relevant. We just have some data. Now we need to load the standings. So we initialize what tab we want it. That's our main tab for the standings. Then we're going to load those. Well, the way we do that is simply iterate through the data structure that we know how it's set up. It's organized by division, and for each division we need to add a header. And so we're going to add an item. We're going to set its text to be the division name based on what we iterate over. We change its purpose to be a header. That way it's not clickable, it's not going to be having any accessories on it, and so forth. Then because we know there are 5 teams within each division, we can iterate through those, get the current club based on the division standings. We will try to get that information from the team, assuming if we can. If we can, we don't worry about it. If we don't have it, then we'll go ahead and add a new item and go make the various changes. So we're setting the team name to the text. The detail is going to display the team's wins and losses, and then we'll have an accessory for this item to show us more. This is how we drill into the details of the team, that is the list of players. And then it's good practice to do a begin update and end update when you're making a lot of changes to a list. It just caches all of them and waits till the very end until you make the updated change. Once we click on one of the items in the standings, we will try to switch to the new tab, get the current club based on what we clicked on, and update the label, and we'll load the roster. And this is done something a little bit similar. We simply go through the items of the roster, add new items for our list, and because remember, items is a reference to a TListView item, and this is what makes it very similar to a collection in the traditional sense for when I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. So this is where we're setting the detail based on the batting average, also associated with the text. So let's go ahead and run this. The rest of this is some other pieces I'll show in just a second. So let me go ahead and run, and this will bring up the simulator. As you can see, the simulator is running with all of our teams listed here. We have the AL East, Central, and West. Stands for the American League. We have each of the different teams, their rankings, what their standings were at the end of the regular season. What's nice is that I've got a number of items, not a terrible number, but a good number, and I can scroll this without any problems. What's really nice is that I can click on the little button here and I get a search bar, and I can type in, say, the Cubs, which is my local team, and it will automatically filter it for me. We will see inside the source code that, well, it's actually right behind here. There's the only thing that we change is that by clicking it, we toggle the search visible property. This is built into the list view, so by having that little option there, I can now filter this. So that works out really well. I can click on this item and I get a list of all of the players on the team. And what's nice is there's also built-in ability to do an edit. And the edit is like, he got traded, so let's delete him from the list. And same thing for a couple of other players. I can toggle that. I can also go into the lineup and use the check marks, and we'll pick a bunch of different players that I can select from my list. So these are all features that are built in, and of course you can go and find out if an item is selected and then operate on that, which is what we would really want to be able to do. So I can come back here, it remembers the state, and I'm back in the control. The only other piece of code that I didn't show is how we toggle into the edit and the lineup selecting. We simply set up the appearance and what happens when we go into edit mode. So if we hit edit, we're setting the item appearance to be the item right detail delete. If we go into the lineup, we're setting the item appearance to be showing the check with the item list to the right detail. And there's again a variety of options that you can customize to make that work. Next up, we're going to continue focusing on the TListView, but this time we're getting away from the Major League Baseball players, and now we're talking about food processors. But more importantly, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that the TListView knows how to handle live bindings with the bind source and bind list and so forth. And this is an example where we're actually being able to see some of the information at design time by connecting it to a bind source. And so the data is coming from a client data set, but we're still able to access it at design time. And if you wanted to play around, you could go back into for the list and dig into its appearance. These are the different objects that I had talked about. If you wanted to change the item height size, we could go and change that to 60, and you can see that the height automatically changes. Change that to 44 and it's back to its default. I decided that I wanted the detail to be a little bit smaller and underneath the name of the food processor rather than off to the right, because I have some plans for the right information. So I handled that by changing the way I positioned everything. And so the text alignment for the detail is now leading, and as opposed to trailing. And I can also change the vertical alignment to be leading and trailing so that it controls where the different pieces go. Likewise, the text is what I changed the font size to be 15 in bold, and then text vertical alignment that's what's leading. And if we go back to the detail, that's the text vertical alignment is trailing, and so that controls the top and bottom orientation for all of that. Now, which is great, this works just fine. What I'm really trying to show, or want to show in this example, is that I have some ratings, feedback about how good each of these food processors are, plus a price and some other information. I could have done this with a TListBox, and originally I did, and it's extremely slow. There's a lot, because each one of those little pieces of information have to be a separate styled element, and you have to manage that and populate it, and it gets a little crazy. There's a lot of work the list has to do to keep up with that. Well, fortunately, the list view is extensible in a couple different ways. What I'm doing is I'm enhancing the items to show more information. And let's take a look at how we're populating all this stuff and where this comes into play. So one of the things that I have this update objects, and one of the things we'll find if you look at the events on our control, there's an on update objects, and this gets called whenever the objects inside of your list need to be updated. And so I'm actually triggering off of that in order to get access to the different pieces of the item. And so, for example, if I wanted to get to the text label, I can do that for a given item. I'm going to go ahead and create them if I can't find it. So I'm actually adding a new control, but it's not a T text or a T label. I'm adding a T list item text. So I try to find that. If I can't, I'm going to go ahead and add it. And this looks very similar to just dynamically creating a component. That's what they are. And so here I'm altering, setting up the name of the field. I'm putting in the various alignments, how I'm going to place it based off of trailing to the right edge of it, so it'll always be snapped over to the right. So I have a text label, I have another text label that represents the score, and then I've got a number of icons that I'm displaying, which is a new thing called a T-list item rating icon. And that's the new piece that I've created for this. And the rating list icon is over in the rating list items unit. and it descends from a TListItem object. So this allows us to create specialized items that we can add to the list. Now, they're very lightweight. We don't want these to be very heavy-handed or very complicated. Then you start to defeat the purpose of the list view. But as such, we can do some really cool things because there is a render method that gives it an appearance, and so the methods that are associated with all this, I'm just creating little path objects to represent the different ratings that I have. And for each one of those, I just change an integer value that maps to the rating value. To render it, I'm just changing based on what rating value it is, what colors, is it red or black, and then simply draw the path in the rectangle that I can figure out, which is I'm taking the path data, fitting it to the local rect, which is what I know about. I inherit that. So going back to the code, after I call all of this, I've got my little rating icons, and then I can connect these to the database as well. So I'm actually driving those values of the items based on what is coming back from the bind source and making the association. So let's give this a quick little run and we can see what it looks like. So as you can see, we have a much more sophisticated display than simply the name of the food processor and the model number that's used as the detail. These are the two labels. One is for the cost and one is for the rating level, and then the little indicators are representing how well these different food processors were rated on a couple different tasks. So again, I can still have all the scrolling capability. It's nice and fast, which is great, even though I'm displaying quite a bit more data than just simply text. Now, next up, I want to show a way to make the same extended display, but now let's make it interactive. Right now, this is just showing information, but not doing anything with it. So let's take a look at the next example. Next up, we're going to use the TListView control yet again, but this time we're going to display songs and their artists, along with a way to set the rating, a 5-star rating if you will, for what we want to associate with each of these songs. So we're going to add on to the list view, but we're going to have that be interactive. So I have a simple application. It's a list view. Pretty straightforward, not a whole lot I'm doing on the customization side. The current songs are being stored by a client data set. So let's take a look at what happens when we load this up into the list. So when we go ahead, we load the data from the client data set coming from an XML file, because we do want to persist the ratings. So we're not just loading this up, make a change in memory, and then throwing it away. We want to save it. For each song we load up into the list view, and again, for each song that we have, we want to create a new item. We set the text and the detail of that item appropriately from the client data set. But then the key piece is right here, is we're going to add a new list item type called list item rating stars that is going to allow us to change what the rating is. We initialize the rating a certain value coming from the database, then we're going to associate a change event handler so that if the user does click on one of the stars, which happen to be just circles right now, but if it does, then it will go and we can do something with that change. Specifically, we can filter our playlist, edit it, change the rating to the new rating, and then go ahead and post it. So we keep that updated all the time. And then save all the merge changes to the XML file when the application closes. So what does this look like? Let me run this first. So here we have our list. We have our list of titles, and we have our empty circles. We want to be able to change the rating. So we pick one. I'm a huge Def Leppard fan, so we'll give that one a rating of 5. I can make any of these different changes as necessary. Go ahead and change all the different items as necessary. If we want to close out one of them, just double click on the item and we can make the changes, which is nice. And so again, it's all scrollable. I have a much larger list than I had before, and all the state changes are managed there. If I go ahead and close this and come right back in, then it will also show me the same state of all the persisted ratings that I picked. I'm using a circle here just because that's what's readily available. I have another session that I'm presenting called Introducing Radiant Shapes, also during CodeRage, where I actually show the same type of example, but I'm using actual star shapes, which is one of the elements that are available in Radiant Shapes. So I encourage you to tune in and see what all cool things we can do with our FMX applications with Radiant Shapes. So moving on, how do we do this? What is this list item rating stars? Well, up above, we go back up to the top. The key piece is right here. There's a type called TListItem embedded control. It's another list item, but what it does is, rather than be a very lightweight little thing that we can have, it's a lightweight container. So we can put anything inside of this embedded control. It's almost like, think of it as a little panel inside of the item. So all I've done is made a descendant of that holds 5 stars, which happen to be of type T ellipse right now. It's like setting up a little dynamic composite control. I set up the different stars when I go ahead and create them, which is it's where I'm initializing the different stroke colors and all of that, the positioning of it. I also assign the event handlers for each of the stars, and again, they're just shape components, so they have all the traditional events that you would need. When that happens, though, I do need to do something. So when the rating changes, I need to change the color. If they change it, I will then cause the event to fire, which means my calling program will become notified, which is how I update the database. And so it's a very simple way to extend the capabilities of our TListView controls. So that's all the information that I have. I hope you have found some new nuggets of information. The list views are extremely powerful for our mobile applications and very flexible. And if you ever feel like you're limited in what you can do with them, there's probably a way to get some more power and flexibility out of the controls. All of these samples that I had will be available on our website in the Raize.com sessions section for the Object Pascal Delphi sample code. It's mobilelistcontrols.zip, and for the C++ version, that is the alternate version right there with the C++ suffix. At this point, I'll switch over to the live Q&A.
So the first question is, in a future app, I would like to have to present a view of about 15 fields. I would believe a list view present the main info, user and computer, would be sufficient for selection. But for details, would a single page showing the details be okay? And would the selector changing fields shown on a prime page be acceptable on a Windows platform? I'd rather use a kind of DB grid showing all fields. Is that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the same question as well, so I can kind of take it all in. It certainly would be a good place to start. I don't know if it's it kind of depends on the data and you know what the single page and the details, like how much of that gets covered on a single page. If it can be and your device supports the room for that, yeah, that's a very common technique. Is you use the list to locate the particular record that you're interested in, and then you add in one of the more or the detail accessories to indicate that you can get more information by tapping there, and then it switches to a different view, which would give you, the extra fields associated with that one record. That's a very common metaphor for list controls.
Regarding searching a list view, will it search text and detail or only text?
I believe it is just the main item for it, not the detail strings that you provide to it. What I don't know, that's a really good question. I don't know if you can customize that to change that behavior.
Sounds like a good opportunity to try that. See what happens. There is a difference to use on update objects to customize, add embedding controls, or using appearance package. Or what's the difference, I guess, maybe?
I'm not quite sure I understand what he's referring to by an appearance package. Is he talking about a style?
That was what I guessed it to mean.
Okay. If he wants to chime in and provide more information as to, he's got an edit a little bit further down. Maybe that clarifies that.
It says appearance
No,
package.
Same thing,
Yeah.
Adding embedded controls.
Is the difference performance?
Typically, the on update objects were presented with that because the framework for the list view surfaces that ability, and that is the entry point to do that. If what is referenced by appearance package, if it is a style, then that's not possible with the list view for the items like it is on the list box. So that's your option to get into the nitty-gritty construction mechanism, is when you're going into the on update objects.
So as far as performance, which is better for performance, or?
For performance, the list view is better, especially when dealing with longer lists of similar based items, which is why it was designed in the first place. So with respect, like my example where I talked about embedding the stars for the ratings, that is, those are lightweight objects, and it's just one embedded object. You're not going to want to embed in, high capacity type, sub lists or large images, track bars and things like that require a lot of extra overhead. You want to keep those things very light weight, and that makes the engine for the list view work effectively.
In changing the appearance of it, is it better to use which is more performant? And maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but is it better to use the on update objects to customize it, or use the styles to change the appearance?
Depends on the control that you're using. So on update object is in the list view. The styles are the way to go about changing the appearance for a list box. And really, the only time you need to use the on update object is really if you want to modify what's inside of the list view items, and that the basic functionality doesn't provide what you need.
How can you programmatically add 2 columns of text to the list box?
To the list box, 2 columns of text.
Similar to using as a string grid, 2 columns.
Well, I guess the question is it really 2 columns that, as I resize it, they would like wrap? Kind of thinking of the old columns property of the VCL list box. If that's the effect that you want, I think you'd have to go in and change the layout for the items inside the list box. The style would allow you to do that. If you just want to put 2 text items into a single list box item, like a name value grid, so they're always in tandem, again, you're going into a style and just dropping the 2 text fields or a text and an edit box, inside of the style entry for that. Unfortunately, it's not trivial when you start dealing with the embedded styles, because when you're modifying the control, you have to make sure you name them the right way, and it's a little beyond the scope of just this session.
Okay. So he's expanded on his question here. It says when you're talking about appearance package, and he has a link to the doc wiki for a specific example that he's referring to. I don't know if you can see that link there.
Oh, for the multi-detail thing. Okay, I'll have to dig in a little bit deeper. If he wants to send me an email, I'd be happy to follow up on it.
Apparently, I typed in the link to download your materials wrong.
Yeah, you have an S instead of a Z for the domain name.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. raize.com/sessions/mobile list controls.zip. Okay, I have a list view connected to a client dataset via live binding. The item header is set, and when loading it is displayed, but when using the internal search on the list view, the header disappears, and I can only get it back if I save and close, then reopen the client dataset. Is there anything to fix this? I'm currently using XE6.
Oh boy, I don't. My first reaction would be to try it on XE7, because I know that there was some things that were changed in the list view going from XE6 to XE7. But clearly that sounds like that it should be something that's addressed in the base class for that. Because once you turn the searching off, you should be able to get back to what you want there. The header should get restored.
And are you going to write a book on FireMonkey components?
That's a good question. Don't know. That's the biggest challenge, is the time that it takes, and I have a very full schedule with things. But if I can't do a full book, I'm certainly going to keep promoting the different techniques and different ways to leverage the FMX framework. So love to do one. There's certainly plenty of material. It's just trying to allocate the time with everything that's going on. But I certainly try to share as much as I can, as often as I can.
Yeah, as having been involved in writing a book before, I can attest to that. It takes way more time than you expect it to, especially technical books.
Oh, yes.
Thoughts about using string grids as list views. What do you think of that?
Well, I guess it all comes down to what it is that you want to accomplish in your UI. The nice thing with the list view is all the built-in support for all the customizations that you can do with an item that doesn't require the style modifications that the list box does. So adding the accessories, the different kinds of accessories, the built-in delete support, changing the position for the detail string. There's a lot of nice stuff that for general list manipulation, the list view is the way to go. To switch over to a string grid, which is just going to give you 2 cells, or a cell for that matter, and then you would be responsible for what you do inside of it. If that's what you need, I suppose you could, but I don't think you'll get any of the inertia effects that the list view has built into it. Like anything, I don't like not recommending things, but I would certainly use caution for going with that approach. If you had a really good case that it made sense to do that, by all means. But the list view is very cool.
When using a list box, seemed like grouped and transparent went away in XE7?
Well, that's more or less not so much a change in XE7 as it is in iOS. So the visual indicators that you used to have with some of the styling that was done has changed with the last several iterations of iOS, which is what I was demoing in. So you will see a change on with respect to that based on what you're building against.
Is it better to use live bindings or methods, like you used in your examples, to manually populate the list view?
Yeah, I guess I have examples for both, more or less to illustrate both ways. They both serve kind of their purpose. The live bindings are extremely flexible in what you can do and set up. There are some subtleties with respect to that I would like to have a little bit more control over. For example, I would like to be able to buffer the amount of data that gets retrieved. For smaller lists and things that, a couple hundred records, not a big deal. But if I've got more than that, I need to control that a little bit more than what live bindings give. So in that case, it may make more sense to just kind of manually load the data that you need from into some backing store and then use that to populate your controls.
And there's a request to see the last slide from your Radiant session here. I guess they're wanting to get the links again. I'm going to find these really quick here. Hopefully that's the link they're looking for for this discount code, CodeRage 9.
Yeah, you can also get to our landing page. If you go into the CodeRage exhibit hall, there's a Raize software logo image with a link there, and that'll take you to the same page that has all that information on it as well.
Excellent. So I'll put the link in here for the exhibit hall. Excellent. Well, thank you, Ray, for yet another great session.
You're welcome. Glad to help.